So this video is going to be a bit different than usual. I'm going to talk about three topics, Candace Owens, TPUSA, and Erica Kirk. Candace is the first on that list, by the way, and the main reason I'm making this video. Now, I don't like people wasting my time, and I certainly wouldn't like wasting yours, so I must advise you that if at this point you're still a Candace Owens fan, you are not going to like this video. There's a high probability that you are going to unsubscribe, that you're going to jump straight to the comments and call me names, and that's okay. I have no problem with that. That would be entirely up to you. But again, I have a problem with people wasting my time, so I don't want to waste yours. So maybe you can jump straight to unsubscribe and click away and watch something else. No hard feelings. Now, if you're still watching, I guess that you want to know what is my opinion on what's going on with Candace Owens. And that's the important word, my opinion. At no point of this video I'm going to tell you to stop watching her stuff because I don't like to be told what to watch or not watch. But my opinion is going to be based on critical thinking, as every single one of my videos has been. So let's begin with the most important question that everyone, regardless if you're a fan of Candace Owens or not, will have about my opinions. What took you so long to talk about this? Well, that is a very relevant question. And the answer is that I don't usually make content about other content creators. Yes, I'm dedicated to exposing bad actors, no matter where they come from, but one thing is people committing crimes, like when I analyze psychopaths and sociopaths or people with the power to make actual policies like liberal politicians. But in fact, you might have noticed this from last year. I'm more focused on politics, and my main focus has been exposing liberals and their agendas. I think that learning how to avoid sociopaths using real-life examples or how to spot all the toxicity that happens in politics is more important than any infighting, at least to a degree. For me, it was obvious that after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I should be focused on moving and working towards my goal of bringing common sense, destroying the woke mind virus, and crush any liberal that dares to raise their head. I think I have that responsibility with my audience. So when I first saw the reports about Candace Owens exposing stuff about TPUSA around October, I said, okay, every organization has dark secrets, so it would be natural with the amount of scrutiny about Charlie Kirk's death to find out if there could have been some kind of involvement inside of the organization, even if it was just negligence, for example. But I didn't pay much attention to that. I mean, we still have the question if Tyler Robinson acted alone, and I'm pretty sure many of his freak friends knew what he was going to do, and maybe even could have helped him. So what if there was one or two of them infiltrated in TPUSA? That sounds plausible. In fact, I remember that I made a video about a group chat screenshot that Candace Owens shared on her show. I immediately said that this screenshot is legit because there are like 10 ways to prove that a group chat is fake. And the funny thing is that I was attacked by people saying, "How dare you believe Candace Owens? She's a basket case. Those group chats must be fake." Lo and behold, the TPUSA dudes, which I will absolutely talk about them later in this video, confirmed that the group chat was real. That is not to brag that I was right, which I was, but so you understand that from the beginning I've tried to see things for what they are, on any side. But that was the only time something actually concrete about Candace Owens popped up on my timeline. Because no, I don't watch her show. I just watched her first episode on Becoming Brigitte, which, not gonna lie, was entertaining. And one of her latest shows when she was going to expose the US military for being implicated in Charlie Kirk's murder. And this is nothing personal. I don't watch podcasts. I don't watch anything longer than 20 minutes. I simply don't have time. If I watch Candace Owens' show, it would be only fair to watch, I don't know, Sean Ryan's podcast, and GFY, I am not gonna sit 3 hours watching people ramble. I'm going to use an AI to give me the too long didn't read. The only Sean Ryan podcast I've watched was of the Charlie Kirk head of security, and I almost felt like dying. On the other hand, I could call myself a fan of Matt Walsh, and I have had hard disagreements with Matt Walsh on some topics like Japanese anime and video games, but I agree with around 80% of his takes. And shocking news, I have never watched a full hour-long Matt Walsh podcast, or episode, or show, or whatever he calls it. I'm thankful that he divides his shows in sections that can be easily watched standalone, which is something that I have copied for my own live shows. And again, it doesn't matter if I haven't watched Candace Owens' shows, because I have never talked or analyzed anything that Candace Owens has said. When I made my video about TPUSA challenging her to attend their expose of all her claims, I was talking about the very public rift between Candace Owens and TPUSA and how both were handling it. In fact, funny enough, I was more critical of TPUSA's way of handling this, and until very recently I still was asking the question, why can't they just allow Candace Owens to do this remotely from her studio? I mean, they were rejecting Candace Owens' offer to do it online, and in that very episode, Andrew Colbert was attending the Charlie Kirk show online. That was bizarre, and yeah, it could have been a bit hypocritical. They had no real explanation as to why this had to be in person. But again, we are at a stage in which that doesn't matter anymore. Because we arrived at the point in which Erica Kirk, who I will talk about her in detail in a minute, Erica had to tell Candace to stop. And I made that analysis and everybody knew that she was talking about Candace, even if Erica didn't mention her directly. The good thing is that that very day, Candace Owens reacted on her show, assuming that 100% Erica was talking about her. So, props to Candace for saving us a ton of time, I guess. But that was the mask-off moment. Candace basically confirmed that this was a personal thing. And I hear you say, of course it was a personal thing. Charlie was Candace's friend. And you would be right. Because Andrew Colbert and Blake Neff confirmed that Charlie and Candace were still friends up until the moment Charlie was shot. In fact, that's something that I mentioned in one of my videos. I see people claiming that Charlie and Candace are no longer friends, and I told you, through this very channel, that there was no way to prove it one way or another, unless people really close to Charlie said something about it. And there you have it, the TPUSA dudes confirm it. But back to this is a personal matter for Candace. Yes, that seems to be mostly correct because of their friendship. But it cannot be more personal than it is for Erica. He was her husband. He was the father of their children. There's no way you can compete with that. But at the same time, I'm not naive. How many times a loving wife has betrayed his husband for a lover, I don't know, money, power, whatever? Countless times. So that's a possibility, that Charlie Kirk had bad judgment when he picked Erica. But the fact is that Erica was not the center of all this until very recently. All this time, the main ones in the eye of the storm have been the TPUSA dudes. And by the TPUSA dudes means everyone at TPUSA. Because that is not me saying it. That's pretty much literally the words that Candace used. Charlie was betrayed by everyone. Again, she can say whatever she wants. She has that right. But obviously, people are taking her words at face value. And at least on my comments in all my platforms, most are implying that literally everyone at TPUSA, and including Erica, all of them conspired to double-cross Charlie without exception. So you mean to tell me that this guy, who was a literal mastermind, who built Turning Point USA from scratch, who knew how to navigate politics to do this, and had the bragging rights to be considered a future president of the United States of America, at the same time had a 0% success rate in picking the right people to be around him, including his wife? Is that what you're saying? Because that is statistically impossible. In fact, let's say you tried to pick only the worst possible people for your movement. you would make the mistake of picking good people here and there, because there's no such thing as 100% when it comes to human behavior, which of course means that nobody can say that everyone at Turning Point USA is free of scrutiny, or they are immaculate angels. That is asinine. They have to be scrutinized precisely because of the amount of money involved. I myself have made countless videos about TPUSA. I was the first to say that Andrew Colvett didn't pass the smell test for me. And guess what? He still doesn't. Does that mean that I think that he killed Charlie Kirk? No, absolutely not. But I also made not one, not two, but 3 videos about TPUSA's Chief of Staff, Mikey McCoy, and his weird behavior the literal second Charlie Kirk was shot. At no point I said anything remotely close to, oh, Mikey McCoy must be implicated in Charlie Kirk's assassination. No, my job there was pointed out that if you thought Mikey McCoy's behavior made no sense, you were not going crazy, because to this day, nobody can explain McCoy's behavior. And I said that the easiest way to dispel those conspiracies was to just release their phone logs, which they haven't. Which brings us to a question that I have been asked nonstop in the past couple days. Frank Turek said in September that he had had a conversation with Charlie a few months ago about some violent act in the news, and that conversation derived to Charlie saying the words, "I know they want me dead." Erica, on the other hand, just recently said on the Glenn Beck podcast that she was in possession of Charlie's phone, and she was confirming that the day before he was murdered, he didn't text anything along the lines of, "I am gonna be murdered, they're gonna come in after me, someone's going to kill me." So, people are up in arms saying that, oh, see, one of them is lying. And not exactly, because Turek was very clear that his conversation was a few months ago. That was in September. Erica was clear that on September, like as you had this conversation in September, a few months ago would be like, I don't know, June or July. Erica was clear that on September 9th, Charlie had not texted anything of the sort. Are you starting to realize that the people who make these claims online, both the ones who spread them and the ones who repeat them, doesn't bother to, 1, to watch the original clips, and 2, to have the minimum critical thinking to realize that there is an obvious temporal separation between what both statements refer to, even if the content is similar? And the answer is no. Of course. It's much easier to go with the text snippets that confirm their biases, because the other option takes time and effort. That's boring. Even worse, the other option would make them look like fools who have been duped into believing things, so their brain fires up this defense mechanism to say, no, we can't possibly be wrong. That is not happening. Which I am going to say it again, as I've said in many videos. It is understandable that we don't trust the FBI, or any 3-letter agency, or any government for that matter. But that doesn't mean that every single thing they do or say, you're going to believe the opposite. It's like they say, if you believe every single conspiracy, then you are low IQ. If you don't believe any conspiracy, then you are low IQ as well. Turns out that you should be putting your gray matter to use. And vertical videos is something that is frying our ability to do this. That is a topic for another rant. So yes, I have called out the weird stuff of Turning Point USA. No, I don't trust them blindly, but at the same time, I can understand that it's obvious that they are in trouble. Charlie Kirk being dead is basically TPUSA being dead if they don't act fast. And apparently, you have reached out to me to clarify this, and yes, Turning Point USA is big enough to tip the scales in elections, so I'm willing to give them some grace, especially to Erica Kirk. But before I talk about Erica, I have to finish my point about Candace Owens. Up until like 3 days ago, I just considered her just another agitator. I was asking you, do you think she's got the power to bring Turning Point down? What exactly is Turning Point's influence over the American public? Because that would be the real measure of Candace Owens' influence on politics, and that is actually a big deal. Because no, if Democrats seize power again, she's not going to be affected by that. That is important. I don't know if she could actually benefit from that, maybe. But again, that's not what we are talking about here. We're talking about this becoming a personal matter to Candace, but not in a positive way. Because she personally hits back at Erica and refuses to stop, she basically proved that she wants to bring the whole thing down, as in bring Turning Point down. And now we know, just from critical thinking, that no, Turning Point couldn't be rotten to the core because that argument of Charlie being simultaneously both a mastermind and stupid when it comes to people collapses on itself. But this is not to say that 100% of what Candace Owens has said is wrong or fake. The only way to prove this is to watch every single one of her shows from the moment Charlie was killed and make a curated assessment of every single one of her claims. And I'm sure that after that massive undertaking, we will find out that, well, let's say that 60% of her claims are batshit crazy, 30% are maybe plausible, and 10% are things that can be actually confirmed. As the TPUSA dudes have confirmed that what she has said in a couple of times, namely that group chat and that she and Charlie were friends all this time. I'm sure that there must be other of her claims that can be confirmed. This might sound like I'm defending Candace, but 10% is not that bad of an average. I would take that 10% myself if it brings us closer to the truth, because yeah, this is a collective effort. The problem is that Candace already exposed herself as someone who is doing all this in bad faith. Erica tells her to stop, and she smugly says no. Candace says that you cannot be widowed into a CEO position even if the mastermind/idiot Charlie was the one who planned Erica's role in advance in case something happened to him. Not to mention one of my favorite takes in which she says that the reason Charlie Kirk's show has dropped in the podcast charts is because, and I'm not joking, the guys running it are not being honest. Candace, maybe you can consider that, I don't know, the host of the Charlie Kirk show fucking died? Have you thought that it could be a factor of it dropping off the podcast charts? So only from the fact that she's coming in bad faith, that makes, at least for me, dismiss what she has to say. But contrary to what most of her detractors claim, I don't think Candace is doing this for the money. I think that not even a personal vendetta fits this. I think this is way more insidious. I have no way to prove anything. I have no evidence whatsoever. I just have a hunch that this is not about the money. Which brings us to Erica Kirk. And I've also made some videos about her, and one of my most popular videos recently was analyzing that hug with JD Vance. Now, not only on that video, but in other videos about her, I've seen literally hundreds, if not thousands, of comments saying something along the lines of, I don't trust her, or there's something off about her, or she must be on edge, I'm sure. Now, this is something that I have not said in other videos, but I'm going to address in this one. There are a couple of reasons that explain why so many people don't trust Erica Kirk. And again, if you stand for Erica Kirk and you stand for critical thinking, you will listen to all that I have to say before jumping to the comments. First of all, people are saying, oh, that is so convenient. Your husband gets murdered and you become the CEO of a 9-figure organization. That is one of the most retarded arguments that I've heard. Because that implies that Erica prefers her current job as Turning Point CEO than having her husband alive and be able to dedicate herself to her children, as she was doing up to the very moment Charlie was shot. I don't know what kind of distorted reality you have of success, but I can guarantee you that Erica was winning at life before Charlie was shot, not after. If you think that Erica is better off right now, it only means that you, yourself, will be better off with the same switch. That it would be a net benefit for you to get rid of your husband and take his place at his 9-figures company. Oh no, that would not be the case, I hear you say. Then why do you think it would be the case for her? Then, another of the arguments would be that but she's not grieving the way normal people grieve. Well, that must be because she's in a position that close to zero women would ever be. So we have no way of knowing what any woman would do in that situation. She's in that damn if you do, damn if you don't limbo. If she cries, if she doesn't cry, if she shows up, if she doesn't, people are going to criticize her. And being in an impossible position is an understatement. And yes, I have suggested in one of my videos that she should be looking for a CEO with experience as soon as possible. But this is a Steve Jobs and Apple situation. Nobody can replace Charlie Kirk. It is sad to say, but not Erica or not any of the TPUSA dudes. I wish this was as simple as you just keep your head down and keep working. It is not as simple as that. And precisely that was the reason why Charlie kept putting himself out there debating people live. Because you have to put yourself out there. And that's precisely what Erica is doing. She's got no other option, literally no other option. But why does she keep going on tour? Well, shocking news. She's not doing even a fraction of what Charlie did, not for obvious reasons. She has to do the job of two people now, and one of those jobs, and I'm pretty sure that none of us will get to know what is it to be CEO of something like Turning Point. She can't just hide at home and leave TPUSA headless. But again, I see your comments that there's something off with Erica. Well, I have analyzed Erica. I have not issued a body language analysis of Erica as in a standalone video because that would be bad taste. I have analyzed some of her reactions, yes, but there's something that we need to say about Erica Kirk. She doesn't have the charisma of Charlie. She doesn't have the stage presence of Charlie. She doesn't have the eloquence of Charlie. And guess what? Nobody would have expected her to fill those shoes. She tries her best doing those interviews, but she's not a professional communicator. It shows. And the problem is that at that level of scrutiny, her clumsiness and inexperience feels like she's faking it. That she's faking emotions when we already know that nobody can possibly know how would be the proper reaction in that scenario. I don't know, how can you not notice how she's so fake if you're a so-called body language analyst? Well, that tells me you haven't watched enough of my videos because I've always stressed that the importance of context. Yes, I could see that Erica can be a bit stiff at times. That she dropping the volume of her voice for emphasis can sound odd, but that's a real thing. That's something that I coach my clients to do in public speeches, in interviews. That's something that I do on my own videos, but takes time and practice to get right. She obviously doesn't have that practice. Oh, you mean that all that is fake and staged? No. I mean that I'd like to see how you perform at an interview or at a press conference or as a public speaker without this level of pressure. Because yes, speaking in public is something you have to master. Some people like Charlie Kirk have natural talents, and even them study and practice for years. You cannot pretend that a widow whose husband was shot in the most public and horrific way, who has small kids, who has the responsibility of leading a 9-figure organization during its darkest times, that has real, tangible impact in the elections and future of the United States, and that is being attacked from bad faith podcasters to behave in the most professional way. And the thing is that if she behaved in the most professional way, she would be criticized as well. There's no way that she can win this. And the fact that she had to address Candace Owens directly only means the extent of the damage that is being done to the project. And you might ask as well, oh, but she's more upset about Candace than about Tyler Robinson. She even forgave him. I mean, I don't know what kind of win you think that argument is. Tyler Robinson shot 1 round. And now he's going to be prosecuted for that. If Erica had any power to stop that bullet, she would have done so. It's obvious that Candace Owens keeps taking shots at Turning Point and now at Erica herself. Does that mean that since Since Erica is a Christian, she must allow that to happen? No. The same way that if she had the opportunity to stop that bullet, she would have done so. Now she has the opportunity to stop the attacks on herself and TPUSA. I really didn't know that was so hard to understand, but well, here we are. I'm pretty sure that this is not going to be the last time I address these topics, but that's it for now. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, well, thanks for watching this far. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Body Language Guy. Much love and bliss.